Storytelling run here. I want to talk about dungeon mastering, game mastering, a simple solution to things like encumbrance, material components, weather conditions, food, daily costs, and things like that. Things that are, could be like sort of a limiting factor in a game and an annoyance, an inconvenience, a frustration. I want to talk to you about how just to role play those out really once in a great while. I don't worry too much about encumbrance and conditions that they got to like deal with, like the weather, like if it's a cold weather thing, if they're in the cold weather, like in Rhyme with Frost Maiden or in Storm King's Thunder. What I do is I just once in a while I will bring it up and ask them how they deal with it, and then let them describe something. And if it sounds good enough, it's good enough for me. Or I can have them do a little roll, and they can have a little disadvantage or a penalty for a little bit. But I don't overplay those things like encumbrance, material components. I don't really overdo it because it kind of drags the game down. So if you feel like they're getting a bunch of stuff, just ask them, how do you carry all this stuff? And then if they give you a halfway decent answer, cool. Then move on. If they're carrying a ton of stuff, at some point you can say, hey, you got a lot of stuff. You got to figure out what to do with that. They could have a wagon. They could hide it, little treasure cache. While they go into a dungeon or whatever. Just any kind of let them be creative. And if that sounds creative enough, then do it. Then cool. And then play the game. Don't make it so let's have fun and not make it so tedious. And I mean that's basically all I want to say. So that's really it. I think I have more to say though on this. Let me pause and think a minute. Okay, yeah. So like in Tomb Annihilation, they got the whole jungle and all kinds of conditions and food and dehydration, and so I just kind of play that out at the beginning, like how they deal with that, what do they do, and then if they if they say something, if they get the right stuff and they say the right stuff, I don't I'm not gonna do like a hex crawl and chart of them starving or and they got to refill and all that kind of stuff. As long as you have the players kind of be a little creative and explaining what they're going to do, don't worry too much about that. Oh, and another thing, envision it this way: we as persons play these characters, right? We come in once a week to play this game and do this, but think of the actual characters. They're dealing with these little things all the time in their little fantasy world, the little avatars. So they're dealing with their encumbrance and their health and their food and what they're doing. So you don't have to, as a DM and players, don't have to like constantly play that. Just play it like once, have a good little description of what it is, of what how you deal with something, and then move on. And of course, if the player doesn't want to deal with it, then you could give them a little penalty for that session or whatever until they do deal with it, but in their own creative way. But again, like I said, if there's rules in there that are, especially those type of rules where, like material components, where I don't know anyone that uses material components. I did notice, now that one of the characters, the Warlock, has greater demon summoning or whatever, CR4, like I believe, summon. It's pretty powerful demons. I mean, not super powerful, but it says you need the blood of a fresh victim from 24 hours, a dead victim blood. I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna do that. So I just told the character or the player that he can have his character just take 1d10, she cuts herself, the Warlock he's playing, it takes 1d10 damage, and that's the blood that he uses. Something simple like that. So again, with material components, most of them I ignore. Obviously, I believe they need, to be able to talk, audio, and do things like that. But I don't worry about the components. I do use components like as additional little bonuses though. Like if they get like the Warlock has vial components, and 1d4 vial components, and then if she uses that with her spells, she gets a +1 to the attack or whatever, stuff like that. So I do kind of use that for components, but I don't really use like did you get all your components in town and buy all this stuff? I don't worry about any of this stuff. That's like too much to deal with all that. It's too time consuming, and so just once in a while, you throw in little encumbrance dealios or weather conditions, and it makes for a nice thrill when you do it once in a while, and they kind of get a little, oh, I got to think about that, reminding them But don't do any rule that drags the story down, slows the story down. Just and again, like other things, like don't worry about looking at rules all the time. Just let it go and move on to the next thing, and keep the pace of the story going and the character, the what's happening next. Don't drag down on rules too much. So that's just my little advice on those type of rules: encumbrance and material components and weather conditions and other things that you think are of a daily effect on them. Play them once in a while, not all the time, and just let them be creative in how they solve it. And again, if it sounds good, just do that. So that's a little video I want to do on that.